Trump declared a state of emergency for the country. At the beginning of 2026, the geopolitical script in the Western Hemisphere is even more bizarre than that of a Hollywood blockbuster. If you followed the news in early January, you would find that the world has changed. Science is not the kind of slow transfer of power reached through diplomatic negotiations, but rather a physical removal, like a scalpel. Maduro, the tough guy, who had been in power in Caracas for many years, vanished from the presidential palace within just a few days and appeared in a federal court in New York. But the essence of the story does not lie in the sound of gunfire, but in the seemingly dull but actually extremely hardcore executive order signed by the Yeouido a week after Maduro's arrest. Thai's executive order has actually initiated an unprecedented experiment in sovereign asset custody. The Americans not only want to replace Venezuela's leader, but also take over the country as purse, transforming this once oil-rich nation into a trusteeship country that is completely financially dependent on Washington. Toddard, let us take a deep look back and analyze this event together, helping you understand this risky gamble concerning oil, debt, immigration, and global power. That night, the flames in Caracas illuminated the end of an era. On the early morning of January 3, 2026, the residents of Caracas were awakened to a deafening roar. The military operation, code named ABS Oluti Det Ination, physically removed the core of Venezuela as power in an extremely short period of time. This is not a large-scale ground war, but a cross-border capture by the U.S. Special Operations Forces. Under the absolute cover of air power, they launched a surprise attack on the full TTO-na military base. Maduro and his wife Flores were forcibly taken away before they could evacuate. The shock this incident has caused in international law is no less than that of a nuclear explosion. The logic of Americans is very hard. I don't say this is a change of power. I say this is law enforcement. The why dug out the 2020 indictment of the Ministry of Justice against Maduro, accusing him of leading the Sun cartel and suspected of drug terrorism. In other words, in Washington's eyes, what they are arresting is not a head of state of a country, but a globally wanted drug lordee. The complexity at the legal level through this militarized law enforcement approach. The United States attempts to circumvent the provisions in the UNE, CHADA RTER, regarding the prohibition of infringing upon the territorial integrity of other countries. This has set an extremely dangerous precedent in terms of legal theory. As long as the United States wishes, it can carry out cross-border arrests of any disobedient head of state based on criminal charges under domestic law. For Venezuela, the physical disappearance of Maduro marks the collapse of the last bastion of the Chavez era. But a tactical success left a huge strategic vacuum. Who should be in charge of a Venezuela without Maduro? After Maduro was taken away, Del C, who remained on the stage, was actually in a very difficult situation. After Maduro was captured, Venezuela did not fall into a full-scale civil war as many people had expected. On the contrary, former Vice President Delcy Rodriguez was promptly sworn in as interim president. This is actually a rather interesting political irony. The United States has made such great efforts to capture Maduro, but in the end, the successor, it still has to face is still Maduro's closest comrade in arms, and Delcy herself has long been on the US sanctions list. But the true MP administration has demonstrated an extremely strong sense of pragmatism this time. The Y realized that if they continue to support the exiled opposition that had already proven to be unbreakable, Venezuela would only fall into a complete social collapse, and the millions of refugees brought about by the collapse would directly rush towards the US border, which would be an absolutely unacceptable political suicide for Trump. Thus, we witnessed an extremely rare end to double standards. Acknowledge the reality, US officials have begun direct contact with the DLC administration to discuss the resumption of oil production. trading sovereignty for survival. Although DLC vehemently denounced the US kidnapping on television, she was exceptionally cooperative in the actual operation. SHE understood that without the strong protection of Maduro and Russia, her only way to survive was to exchange for a living space through cooperation. Thai's tacit understanding paved the way for the executive order on January 9th that changed the rules of the game. Under a WTHC order, Venezuela's money turned into intangible escrow funds. The person was arrested on January 3rd, and an executive order was signed on January 9th. The action was astonishingly fast. The document signed by True MP on protecting Venezuela's oil revenue is essentially a sophisticated financial operation. This order created a brand new legal concept, which could even be said to have been fabricated out of thin air: foreign government deposit funds. In simple terms, in the future, when Venezuela sells oil to the United States, the money will no longer be transferred to Venezuela's bank accounts, but directly into a dedicated account set up by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. The legal nature of this sum of money has changed. It is no longer an ordinary commercial asset, but has been forcibly defined as a sovereign asset with special diplomatic purposes. What does this mean? This means that although Venezuela still nominally possesses oil and income, it has lost control over every penny. It has become a minor, and the U.S. Treasury Department is the strict parent who holds the lucky money in his hand and still interrogate the whereabouts of every penny of his pocket money. Why was a national emergency declared? To put it bluntly, it's all about guarding against creditors. You might ask, since the United States has already taken control of Venezuela, why does it still go to so much trouble to create a national emergency? The answer is just two words: guard against thieves. Oh no, guard against creditors. Venezuela owes a huge debt of over $150 billion abroad. Over the years, these creditors have obtained countless seizure orders in courts in Delaware and New York. We issued this executive order on January 9th. Once the Venezuelan oil was transported to the United States and sold for money, the moment the money entered the account, I would have been forcibly transferred away by the creditors with the court as judgment. If the money is taken away by the creditors, the Del-Side government will not get a penny. Venezuela's power grid will stop working. The police will not be able to pay their salaries. And the refugee crisis will break out again. This is clearly not in line with the national security interests of the United States. So, True MP invoked the INT, Earn Atai Ona, LEME, RGNC Econom, IC Padowers Act, and forcibly declared a state of emergency for the country. The core logic is that national security takes precedence over private property rights. Analysis is of key provision as of an executive order, Jud ICIL obstruction. It explicitly prohibits any court from using this foreign government deposit fund through means such as seizure or detention. Sub-air. Priority TS order takes precedence over all previous licenses and executive orders. THIAS is essentially a horizontal cut in the judicial system, forcibly opening up an administrative reserve to keep creditors out and ensure that every penny from selling oil can be prioritized for maintaining Venezuela's basic survival and preventing immigration in accordance with the WTHC's wishes. The creditors were on the verge of fainting in the toilet as the fat meat that was right in their mouths was snatched away by the waiter who said, "If there is anyone who is most frustrated in this upheaval, it is definitely not Maduro, who is already behind bars, but those creditors who have been holding on to Venezuelan IOUs and waiting for over a decade." AMONGTHUSEREALEASERAEPROFESSORIPS. They hold a total of over $150 billion in debt, a figure equivalent to Venezuela's GDP for several years. For many years, they have gained the upper hand in the tug of war in the Delaware court in the United States, and are on the verge of getting a share of Citgo by auctioning off its shares. But the executive order on January 9th was like a bolt from the blue to them. The power of pocket veto. A Delaware judge had already approved the sale of Citgo to Amber Energy, a subsidiary of Elliott Investment Management, for approximately $5.9 billion. However, all cross-border asset transactions require a license from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Trump's executive order actually gave the Treasury Department an indefinite delay vote, as long as the White House believes that selling ITGO now is not conducive to stabilizing the situation in Venezuela or wants to leave ITGO to the future trusteeship government. The Treasury Department can continue to hold the license and not issue it. A dimensional reduction strike in legal logic. The creditors claim that this is a commercial dispute and that the commercial exception clause in the Foreign Sovereign Immunity Act should apply. But the White House has taken a major national security move by designating oil revenues as sovereign trusteeship funds in terms of legal status. This administrative intervention instantly turns the court's enforcement order into waste paper. Creditors are now brewing a new round of lawsuits, with the core argument being that this constitutes a levy under the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. In simple terms, if the government, for the sake of national interests, deprives me of my legitimate property rights, then I have to pay compensation. But in the face of the lightning rod of the national emergency, this lawsuit may last until the end of time. Oil exports have indeed resumed, but Venezuela is more like a contract manufacturer. Trump once boldly declared at a White House meeting that he would have oil companies invest $100 billion in Venezuela. The slogan is loud, but the reality is harsh. In present-day Venezuela, the energy industry is entering an extremely special contract manufacturing model. The core of this model is a closed loop of funds. We can describe this process with the following logic. On the production side, due to the abysmal infrastructure, giants like EXXO and MOBIL are actually quite hesitant. They believe that Venezuela is not an investable country at present. Reorganization, which has never left, is making use of the existing joint venture framework to restore production in small but rapid steps. From the capital side, this is the most ruthless part. After the oil is sold to the U.S. refineries, the money goes into a special account of the U.S. Treasury Department. If the DLC government wants to pay the police or repair the power grid, it has to submit an application for fund allocation to the United States. After the review by the United States is approved, the money will not be remitted to Caracas, but will be directly paid to the American suppliers, providing the materials. For instance, when Venezuela is short of food, the money is directly transferred to the grain merchants in the United States, who then transport the grain there. Under this model, the Venezuelan government has effectively lost all its fiscal sovereignty. ITDO, S&T seem like a sovereign state. Rather, it's more like the on-site management department of a large-scale project, with the real chief financial officer sitting in an office in Washington. The ingenuity of this design lies in the fact that it solves two technical problems. First, it prevents money from being embezzled. Second, ensure that funds flow back to the U.S. economy. If right penny spent on fuel eventually turns into an order for American goods and services, this is a typical Trump-style win-win situation. Venezuelans have food to eat, American enterprises make money, and at the same time, global oil prices are pushed down. What do Russia and China think? This is not just about arresting someone, it's also about overturning the table. The scene that occurred in the Western Hem ISP made both Moscow and Beijing feel a chill that they had not experienced since the end of the Cold War. This is no longer a simple change of regime, but a blatant overthrow of the existing international order in broad daylight. Russia's strategic zero COVID. Over the years, Russia has attempted to plant a strategic fulcrum on the doorstep of the United States by providing weapons and loans to Venezuela. The downfall of Mad Euro and the direct intervention of the US military mean that all of Russia's investments at this fulcrum are at risk of being wiped out. More crucially, if the United States can handle Mad Euro in this way, will it do the same to other pro-Russian regimes in the future? 2. China's debt challenge. China is Venezuela's largest creditor and lent tens of billions of dollars through an oil for loan agreement many years ago. Now, the United States controls the distribution rights of oil revenues. This means that if Venezuela wants to repay China's money first, it must obtain approval from the US Treasury Department. This is almost impossible in the current international environment. 3. The violent return of neo-Monroe. Latin American countries have mixed feelings about this. Lula of Brazil publicly criticized the United States for crossing the red line. What people are worried about is not Mad Euro's fate, but the arbitrary logic that as long as the United States does not recognize you, it can send special forces to arrest you. This makes the principle of sovereign equality under the Westphalian system particularly fragile. The most embarrassing one might be Cuba. Venezuela has long been Cuba's energy nurse, delivering tens of thousands of barrels of subsidized oil every day without a single drop. Trump has explicitly demanded that the DLC administration cut off this pipeline. Implemented. Cuba could fall into a full-blown energy collapse. If not implemented, the disbursement of funds by the US Treasury Department will be halted. This series of schemes has caused the political landscape of the entire Caribbean region to shake violently. This is merely the opening remarks of a grand drama. The Venezuelan experiment in January 2026 was essentially the United States testing the application of a total factor hegemony. Physical layer, targeted clearance, is achieved through special operations. Leg L level, forcibly taking over the sovereign assets of other countries through domestic executive orders, undermining international law. Economic layer, the complete separation of financial power is achieved through escrow accounts. Trump attempted to prove that even without large-scale and protracted ground wars, the United States still has the ability to completely reshape a nation's DNA. However, the hidden dangers of this experiment are equally huge. Creditors whose property rights have been deprived will not let it go. It is also unknown whether the oil industry, whose infrastructure is almost in disrepair, can recover under trusteeship, and that kind of capture behavior that ignores sovereignty is sowing the seeds of a backlash worldwide. Venezuela, as oil is still flowing, but it no longer flows into the treasury of Caracas. Instead, it has become the most expensive lubricant in the geopolitical game. The game over sovereignty, oil and money has only just begun. Being able to help you is the greatest motivation for my creation. Subscribe to me, and let's rebuild ourselves and define our future together.